Anyways, today we have Gary and Marla Marsh with us, and we're going to interview them on some of their exploits. And so, when we first met, we had met originally in Fort Belknap. That was the first time I saw you folks. And he's trying to pass the mic off to you.
I think so.
Yeah. And so, but we didn't get a whole lot of chance to talk or to get to know one another, did we? Mm-hmm. That was sort of, when you're in those doing these mission trips where you're working on churches and stuff, it's very limited.
That's all you think about.
That's all you think about. You're just, it's busy, and of course, but that is kind of one of the goals of these mission trips is to get to know people, but there's just often so much going on. It's hard to do that. Oh. And so, so you guys had come to Belknap, and then we saw you again here at the Belgrade Church. That was the second time we met you guys. And how many years ago was that?
That was June, the end of June last 2 years ago, 2019. Yeah. Just before he had his surgery. And
then it was at that point I actually heard you guys were missionaries. And so tell us a little bit about that. Where have you guys done most of your missionary work?
I wanted to be a mission pilot. And so with the theology and history ended up a history major. And then I got my mechanics license for working on aircraft. Bob Seamont said, the only way you can be a missionary is if you're a minister, a doctor, or a nurse. And a friend of mine who had taught me how to fly, Warren Ramsdale, had gone to Tanzania as the mission pilot. And I was asked if I would replace him because he was going to go become the division pilot. But in the interim, I would be teaching school. And so at Ikizu Secondary School in Tanzania in 1970, I ended up teaching geography, Bible, and helping establish a seminary for the students that are there. Later, we were able to go to Nairobi, Kenya, and for several years, and then ended up our mission work in Zaire, which is the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and there as a mission pilot. A friend of mine said that if you know Christ, you're a missionary. And if you know someone who does not know Christ, that is the mission field. So it can be local, it can be overseas. And we enjoyed doing both, actually.
I see. What was one of the most memorable experiences that you guys had being missionaries?
Oh, probably the time that we went to Mfangano Island. We went there to one of my students, theology, in the seminary student, Solomon Otieno, asked if I would go and to his island. I said, well, is there an airstrip out there? He says, no, but there's a place big enough for you to land your airplane. We had a Super Cub at the time. And so we talked to our friends in Kenya at Kamagambo Secondary School, and they said that they would like to go out too. So we made arrangements for the weekend to be at Mfangano Island, and we flew to Musoma, which is in Tanzania on Lake Victoria. And at the time there, we were to check out of the country. Well, the Custom and Immigration officials were a little late getting to us. And so the time that I told my friend, a student there in Homo Bay, I was late getting there. And I told him as I saw him walking up to the airplane in Homo Bay in Kenya, I said, I'm sorry for being late. He says, you're not late. He says, I had a message from the Lord in a dream that you'd be here at such and such a time, and what time is it? And I said, well, it's this time. He says, that's the time that the Lord told me. that I'd be there. So I flew him out to the island, and we had quite a greeting out there of the people. And then I came back and picked up my wife and son, and I went and got the airplane refueled with some fuel and flew back out to the island. And we had a good weekend of meetings. The other group came out by boat, and they had several families that came with them, and they brought the projector and the generator and all kinds of stuff for movies and whatever else. On Sunday, we left and went over to Kisii in Kenya to see if we could get some eggs from the school at Kamagambo, because they had a nice chicken farm there. And Don and Lois Falkenberg were there and took us down. We got some eggs, and we came back, got into the airplane, and my wife had 7 dozen eggs on one knee and my son on the other knee. And we went on down to Musoma to again check back into the country in Tanzania. This was on Sabasaba Day, which was the 7th day of the 7th month, if I remember correctly.
Well, it was near there.
And when I generally fly over the airport, I would watch the little red Land Rover go out to the end of the runway that I was going to be landing on, and then it would chase me down the runway and to where I parked. And this time when I flew over the airport, I saw that the little red Land Rover didn't move. And we landed, and my wife tapped me on the shoulder, and she said, "Do you see what I see?" And I said, "Yes. There in the grass were soldiers with their guns pointed at us." And I decided the best thing to do was to stop. And the gentleman came over and ordered me out of the airplane and asked me where I was from, where I was going. And immigration and customs officials were right there. They said we had planned to meet them at this time, but they wouldn't listen to them. And after quite a few repetitions of the inquiry as to why we were there, I asked them if they knew the chief of the police. And they said, "Yes, you know him?" I said, "Yes," because I had 2 of his kids in school. And he went and got the chief of police, and he came over and he shook my hand real hard. And then he said he'd go over and he talked to the police, the military people. And he came back over and he says, "I don't understand it." He says they had orders to shoot down any aircraft that came into the airport.
Oh, boy.
And they tried to shoot you, and their guns did not work. And
Wow.
he says, "You guys are free to go."
Well, before we left to go walk to the plane, the sergeant walked over to his men and he said, "Unload the bullets, let them see." And full of bullets, but nobody could get their guns to work.
That reminds me of the story of Desmond Doss. You guys have heard the story of Desmond Doss,
Mm-hmm.
where the Japanese soldiers would try to shoot him and their guns would stop working.
Anyway, they told us that we were able to go home, and I didn't worry about which way the wind was blowing on the runway. I pointed the airplane directly toward home at Ikizu, and we took off. I'm usually a pretty quiet person in the car or traveling, and I couldn't help it, but All Night, All Day, Angels Watching Over Me was the song that came out from my voice at that time.
Singing at the top of his lungs.
The next day, Monday,
Wow.
they actually did shoot at the Parks airplane, and they shot at a new East African Airlines DC-3 coming in, which did not land there. So they were intent on doing what they were doing, but God just prevented them from doing anything to us.
Amazing. I was reading a story several years back about some missionaries that had gone to some place that these people were cannibals and headhunters, and when they had spent several years there, they'd spent their whole life there actually, and later, in all of their the stuff that they went through that was all recorded in the book. But right then, towards the end of the book, one of the chiefs approached him and he says, I'm getting old, and the traditional way that they take care of their old people is they strangle us, and then they cut us up and they eat us. And he says, I don't want to go that way. Can I get those same soldiers that you had that was guarding your hut every time we'd go over to kill you? And of course, these missionaries had no idea what they were talking about. And apparently, more than once, they had determined in their mind to go kill these missionaries. And they would go to their hut, and there was these men clothed in bright, shining clothing, with these swords watching over the hut as the missionaries slept. And I just thought that was such an amazing story. And this sounds very similar to what.
Yeah. He just put his finger on the end of the gun and they couldn't shoot us. We wrote a story about that. We put it, my brother-in-law Joe Wheeler has a series of miracle stories or prayer stories are my favorite series. And in the prayer or miracle stories or angel stories, that story is recorded in that.
Oh,
so
wow.
a few more that Gary had happened to him when his plane was impossible to start. He took a family all the way to Nairobi and stopped and started at least twice. And when they got it to Nairobi and he took it to the shop, he couldn't even start it to take it down to down the run, on the parking lot down to the shop that he wanted it to be. And the guy took a look at his
The
starters, and it was grounded. There's no way it could. It was shorted out completely. There's no way it could have started. But he flew for 4 hours and started the engine twice, and God did it for him.
Wow! And the whole time, technically speaking, this thing was not going to work.
You couldn't have started that engine if you'd tried. Well, he said God did twice, and so.
Yeah, there was a Cessna 185.
I've flown in this 185 before. Yeah.
And in another occasion too, I flew into Nairobi, and it was in April, I believe, and I left the airport to go and take some things. I left the airplane locked, but no brakes on, not tied down, nothing like that, because they were going to put it inside the hangar for me at night. And when I went back out to get something out of the airplane, the roof of the East African Aero Club had fallen down inside, like the walls had gone out and the roof came down and it crunched a whole bunch of antique aircraft. 40-some aircraft were damaged on that airport.
Oh, boy.
And my airplane,
our little Super Cub.
the Super Cub was that we had owned at one time. There were 3 Cubs. One of them was on its wheels. The one that we had owned was upside down on top of it. And then a third one was kind of wrapped around both of them. And they were 300 feet away from where they had been tied down. And but the Cessna 185 aircraft were damaged on either side of it, but it never even jiggled. And I've had people from Missionary Aviation Fellowship and other places come in and say, God was sitting on your airplane because it didn't wiggle at all. Things around it were damaged and aircraft upside down and so forth, but yours, nothing happened to it.
Wow.
So God takes care of his things.
Boy, I tell you, that is some story.
That's what I think is happening in Poplar.
Poplar is a special place, isn't it? Yeah. So let's fast forward to Poplar. So you guys are basically in retirement, and then how many years ago did you guys? Well, tell me about Poplar.
Well, first of all, back in 2002, 2004, our daughter-in-law got a job with Indian Health Services, and they were given the Fort Peck Indian Reservation. So they lived in Wolf Point for a short period of time. Then they moved to Poplar, and we went out to visit them. While they were there, with Chris Simons, who is a lady there who's married to a native man, Ed Simons, they and Rich and Margaret tried to start a church, and they were renting it from the Nazarene Church. And then circumstances were such that the family became kind of adopted by some of the native families there, and that one of the mothers of one of our native folks there was terminally ill, and the doctor said she had to stay at the hospital in order to get the medical treatment. Our daughter-in-law says no, there's no way that she wants to be here. She wants to be at home when she passes away, and we can do everything for her at her home. And so we didn't know a whole lot about that story until 2008, when the 75 of us from Michigan came out there for a mission trip. And of course, Margaret and our son Rich had gone back to Michigan for a while, and they came out there on the mission trip as well. And that family came and was honoring us as the parents of our kids for their ability to be so friendly to the native folks there. So they went back out in 2009. Our daughter-in-law had talked to the Ken Smoker, who was the director of the Health Promotion Disease Prevention Program, and that she would like to see in each of the individual schools, the elementary schools or secondary schools, a clinic established, because they didn't have one before. And they brought it up among the tribes, and that was agreed. So in 2009, they became moved back out there, and at that time, she became the nurse practitioner for several of the elementary schools. And we kind of enjoyed going out there and visiting with them, and tried to establish a church with them at that time. Again, they were trying to get to the Nazarene Church, but for some reason, the church kind of went into a home church, and a lot of the native folks that were coming before did not come again to the home church. So upon retirement, we thought we would help them reestablish the church. And so in 2012, we moved out there.
Yeah.
And
so did you guys rent a place when you say you moved out there? Or?
Well, that was another miracle. We had talked to a realtor several years before, and had asked about a piece of property. They said they would contact us if somebody else was interested in the property. Well, another party was interested, and the house was sold that we had looked at. And it was amazing to us that on our way out to Poplar, the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, either in Minnesota or North Dakota, without telling the realtor that we were coming, they would call us on our cell phone and say, we have a place for you to look at. So somebody was directing our need to go in that direction. We ended up trying to find a place there near Wolf Point. Finances didn't work out for that. And then we found in 2011, I believe it was.
There were several places that they were showing us, but none of them was what we thought we needed. So
they had a house that was not on the market, but was going to be on the market, and wanted to know if we were interested in it. So when we got there, we went and looked at the house, and it was in Poplar, right by the school. And we made an offer, and the bank told the seller to accept the offer. They wouldn't get anything better than that. And so that was the house that we purchased, and We were there until medical reasons sent us down here.
So you guys owned a home in Poplar.
Yep.
And at what point did you guys get the vision of building a church?
Go ahead, Ron.
When he retired, he says, I want to go to Poplar. I think I'd like to get a church started. And that was over a period of a couple of years before we left. We were thinking this through. And that's when we would go out and see Rich and Margaret, and the realtors would call us en route as we went there. And, you know, it wasn't the right place. It was too far out of town. It was not the kind of home that could accommodate people if we had guests or whatever. We needed something that would have good storage and guest rooms, because we knew that we'd be the only place that people could really stay for sure. And we did use it as that. So we bought that house. It was one house between us and the school office, and across the street was the whole school complex. So we appreciated having that. But he says, I want to get a church started out there. I was kind of dragging my heels, wasn't packing very fast. He looked at me, he says, do you really want to go? I said, well, I do, but I don't want to get left behind. So within a little while, we were packed into a big truck, and we left on Halloween of 2012. We got to Poplar on November 2. Our truck was totaled. The trailer we were pulling was totaled, but the things inside of it weren't touched at all. So that was a miracle too.
So another miracle.
Yeah, the Lord is good.
Now, the property you guys, tell me a little bit about the property that was actually purchased for the church itself.
We looked around. In fact, I had asked all of the churches except two, the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church, if we could rent. And I had three answers. No. We already told you so. No. Or the other one was, at the end, just silence. No matter how many times I asked, there was just silence on the end. So we were looking around, and found out that there was a piece of property, 3 city lots. The lots were originally going for somewhere between $7,000 and $10,000 a piece. And these 3 lots for the back taxes were available for $6,000 total. And so I talked with Elder Knowles and the conference, and they came out and they looked at it, and we went to the auction, and we were the only people there, Elder Knowles and myself, at the auction, and there was more than just our property being auctioned off at that time. And so we told them what we wanted to offer, which was the back taxes only. And they kind of teased us, well, aren't you going to increase the amount a little bit? And we said no. So it took a while, almost 2 years, for us to get a clear title to the property. But it was a place that had burned down in 2008, I believe it was, and it had become kind of a city dump in a way. A lot of trash was put there, but we were able to clean it up. Went to Andrews University, where we had been for 35 years, and talked to the architecture department, and one of the architects said he'd be happy to work out a plan for the building. And so he drew up some plans, and I don't know, things have been going ever since.
Let me tell you this about that. Each summer, or each spring, before a mission group would come from Berrien Springs, Bill Keith would come with the pastor, or maybe two pastors, and they'd ask around and see if they had projects that they could work on. And they happened to be in our house the time when we had the Andrews architect coming. He and his wife came and sat down and spent the night with us. And Pastor Ron Kelly was listening to this and seeing what was being planned, to what kind of a church, how much, what size, what do you need in it, and all of the verifications or necessities that we thought we'd like. And we'd been talking to him before he came, and then after he listened to the discussion between Elder Knowles and Gary and the architect. Ron Kelly came over to Gary and he says, "Would you mind if I stayed to hear the full meeting? I want to listen in, and I would like to be part of this." And so that's when we began to have the village church take some active role in the Poplar Church.
So when you say that's when you had the village church take a role.
Well, Ron Kelly asked if they could be part of this plan that we were putting together.
I see. So God had orchestrated this all along.
All that came along because they happened to be right there, Bill Keith and Ron Kelly, and I'm not sure if Dennis Page was there too, but
Dennis Page did mention that he was kind of there from
he
from
was
the start.
from almost from the beginning.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
every year they would come out and be a mission group, and Bill Keith was part of that for many years, and then he was unable to come in the last 2 years.
And you said it was 2012 that you guys had to leave?
We left for there, from Berrien Springs in October 31, 2012. We got there November 2.
I see. And so this thing has been pretty much been autonomous from that point forward.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of this has been actual voluntary work?
All of it.
All of it. We first of all contacted Lee Van Asper, and he just lived down the road 35, 40 miles, and asked if he could come up and clean the foundation. It was a 3-story house, including the basement, 2 stories above. It was a physician's home when he came out to be a physician in the town. And it was a big home. And when he wasn't the physician anymore, then people made it into what they called it, Dale's Hospital. Miss Dale was the nurse that took over some of the medical things. And then when she couldn't be that, then it became an apartment building. And then one day it burned down, not too long before we all came out there.
And the building itself had a basement, and this became a hole.
Big hole when
where
it all
people
burned down. It was a hot fire, and it burned clear into the basement.
And then people would come and just kind of throw their trash in.
Yeah, it was easier to do that than to, brush and big stuff and whatever went in there. And so when we asked Lee if he would come and clean out the hole, that was when it all began. He'd taken Lal, a big crane sort of a thing, and he would used it, and he went and took his chainsaw and chopped off all the trees around the edge, and there were lilac bushes. It was a place where the street people could hide in among the bushes and sleep in the good times of the year when it was warm. And so we wanted to clear cut the property, take the fence out. Well, we didn't take the fence out, but put in a gate, and he came and cleared it out. And the last weekend of a spring trip by the pastor and Dennis Page, and I'm not sure, there was 3 men that came from Berrien Springs to get projects to work on. And that was the time when they got to be part of the project of taking out all the trees. We had to watch out for power lines along C Street, and Dennis was out on the end of something, running the chainsaw, trying to get, his part in there. But it was people who wanted to be part of it was what it was.
And when you guys first purchased this land and had this idea of building a church, I'm sure you guys had all this money already set aside for the church. Is that correct?
No, we did. We had some monies that we set aside to get the thing going, and we had paid Lee to do the excavation of the basement. And some of the bricks that came out of it, I took them home to my backyard and made little walkways between my raised beds for my garden. And so, any rate, we dug it out, and then it was approved by the conference, and they began to move forward with different things. And then Berrien Springs and Village Church and the Stevensville Church began to work together. They
Which conference?
all in Michigan.
Okay, this was the Michigan
Michigan
Berrien
people,
Springs.
2 churches about 15 miles apart.
And then how did Idaho get involved in some of this?
Well,
I
Lee
saw-
Van Aspern went to
Oh, that's
lives
right.
in Idaho,
Yeah.
way up in
I see.
Sandpoint, but that isn't the reason that Joe Reeves was. He was a youth pastor at Village Church, and after he was ordained as a full elder, as a pastor, he had been at Village for almost 5 years, I think, 4 or 5 years. And he came out every summer with a group of the young people on a extreme Bible group. And they'd work doing vacation Bible schools in Brockton, and they stayed in the Brockton school, and then they'd come over and do projects in Poplar or for people in their homes, or make ramps for people who were crippled or needed a wheelchair ramp.
International food fairs.
And the biggest thing that got started was we wanted to teach them healthful eating, healthful ways to feel better. And we started a vegetarian international food fair. And Bill Keith took a hold of that one.
How important is the health message?
Very important.
Okay.
In fact, in response to this building that we're building there, it's not going to be a church that we use just one day a week. It's going to be a facility that a center of influence for Christ 7 days a week. And the International Food Fair, beginning at the very beginning, we had people coming in off the street. We invited the homeless people come in, whatever else. And we probably have close to, just in the one day, we probably feed close to, 150 people or so?
When we first started, there was like 50 to 75 people who came. They didn't know what it was, but we said free meal. And that's important in that town.
And they ate the vegetarian food?
They ate the vegetarian food, and they liked it.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed when we were up there this last time is we would fix lunch, and then some of the natives would come in, and they just were scarfing it down. They loved it.
We went to, this is an aside, but during the year when nobody was there, we would go down to the powwows, and we would listen to their ceremonies and watch their dances, etc. But we'd bring clothes and lay them out, and it was mostly the street people who would get the clothes and take them with them. We also had Bibles that we would give out, and people would come by and get them from us. It was kind of a fun little thing. We saw that the Baptist minister would send a little girl over to our table and take Bibles and go take it to the Baptist table. And so they were helping us give out Bibles. But it was fun to watch. There's different ways God helped us. But the food...
Go to funerals.
Yeah, funerals, the elderly were always fed first. And since we had white hair, they'd bring us a plate to eat too. A lot of times it would have meat all over the plate, but we'd eat what we could, and then we'd share what we had with our friends that we were making, and they'd eat the meat that we didn't eat, and they were glad for that too. So
yeah, that was one of my questions, because when you do attend these powwows, and I guess it is important to make that connection with these people. You're inevitably, because as Adventists we believe that there's certain meats that we should abstain from, and ultimately it's the best way is to completely abstain from meat altogether. And so some of us have made that choice to do so. And so, but when you're in these powwows and you're handed food, then all of a sudden you're handed an awkward situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way you guys dealt with that was to eat what you could, and then to share the meat portion with some of your friends.
Yeah.
And eventually they probably understood why you guys were doing what you. I mean, that gives an opportunity to share why you.
Well, even sometimes we go to the funerals and we would. One of the things with the Native people there is at a meeting they eat. They just share food, and we would take vegetarian foods to the funerals, and the people would get really excited about it. More so that surprised us.
Really?
They would use some terms that I won't repeat here, but
that was
if you were going to do it, it was absolutely scrumptious, the best they had ever eaten before. Can we get some more of this, and so forth like that? And
there was one man that came to the window of the kitchen where we were serving plates.
Put the mic right up to your mouth.
We were serving what I used to call our family favorite from my childhood, was the carrot potato casserole. It had some gluten steaks in it, and you braise it and roast it in the oven. Then you put mushroom soup over top and bake it for a full another hour, and it absorbs that flavor into the potatoes and carrots. Any rate, this one man, he was relatively young. I'd say he's maybe 30, 25. He came to the window and he was saying, "Who made this? Who made this?" And he was pointing at the casserole that we had served. He said, it's blank, blank good. So we knew that they were enjoying it. And that was the impetus, I believe, that got us talking to Bill Keats and others, that we need to do something for vegetarian food so people get used to what it tastes like. Not to be just talking about it. They need to actually eat it and see what it tastes like.
Now, many people are going to be saying, because, here you're giving Native people vegetarian food. It seems like the antithesis of their whole entire culture, particularly the Plains Indians, because they relied so heavily upon buffalo and other things.
They had a name for us.
Okay, what'd they call you?
Abigail Red Door was a good friend of ours, and she was the one who taught us how to sing in Lakota language. We don't know what we said, except that we know the hymn. And so we could sing it phonetically because they'd written it out, and we learned how to pronounce certain things. Any rate, she said she had a little pamphlet at her house one day, and I said, "What's that?" And I took it and I was reading it. And there was a joke on one of the pages. Says, "You know what a vegetarian is? He's a poor hunter."
I've heard this one before.
So she was laughing and we were laughing, and we kind of enjoyed that together. So.
But there were other things that we were doing as well. Andrews University sent out their nursing students for a week or so. And one of the things that was interesting to us was the people who said, yeah, there are nursing students that come from other schools there in Montana, but there's something different about those students from Andrews. And I asked them, I said, well, what is it? Well, they knew everything the same thing as medically, but there's something genuine about them in their love and their care for us. And that made a big difference. Then one of those students who was a nurse, she went over and there was a group in Chicago at the... her parents lived there, and she was a Korean girl. And the church there had been going down to Mexico, and the conference told them, no way can you go down there anymore because of the cartel and etc. And she said to her family and the church people there, well, let's go to Montana. And so the Lombard SDA church there in Chicago came out for a week and did the same kind of things as we did with community service, but they did free medical for a whole week.
Free dental.
Free dental.
Free physical therapy.
And there were people there who would wait a whole year just for them to come back to do their dental work.
Oh, wow.
And other than They've come out there for about every year. I don't know if that this year
They
they're not
came
coming
5
out.
years. No, they didn't come. They said not to come because the COVID. So they didn't go this last year.
But they've been coming out there, and it has the people have really appreciated them. And the group from Michigan, we've done community service as well. We built the flower boxes that they put out in the summer on the main streets of town.
We cleaned the swimming pool.
Cleaned out the swimming pool, which had been a trash heap as well.
They swim on it every summer now.
I have had people
Years.
stop us and say, we appreciate you coming out here with your young people, because they're showing our young people that they can be something else besides just doing nothing.
Yeah, you guys have had a lot of support. This whole thing has had a lot of support in the community, in like the community centers, and because we were actually staying at the college there, there was many people staying there and actually using the facilities for free, which normally they would charge people.
Well, when we first came out there and we didn't have a place to stay, our mission group was 75 people, and we didn't know where we would be staying. And somehow they'd thought they had permission to stay in the dormitories. But we had so many people that Rose Atkinson came over and said, "What in the world are you doing in here? Get out." So somebody else said, "Why don't you use the teepees?" "What teepees? We don't have any." "Oh, we have some. We'll plant them down. We'll pitch them down on the football field down next to it, not on the field itself." But we had a
13 teepees.
13 big bunch of teepees, big teepees, that many people could sleep in each one. So that was helpful. And any rate, that was the beginning. They'd come by and see these group of teepees down on the football field by the high school, and who's there? Who? They'd talk all over town. What's going on? Who are these people? You know. Then
News travels quickly there.
Oh, they got the jungle drum there too, and so they came to the vacation Bible schools. They loved it, and so every year after that, Margaret and Rich would direct the group, and they'd come out and they'd have vacation Bible schools in the bingo hall. It's just across 2 blocks from the church there.
Yeah, and so when we got there on day one, we were approached by so many different people, the natives themselves, and one guy in particular asked to be baptized, and he had read Dennis Page's.
Rudy? Was that Rudy?
I believe it was Rudy.
Rudy loves him.
Yeah, so you guys know Rudy as well.
He
Oh,
does.
yes.
He does.
Okay, yeah. So it was a real blessing to show up where somebody had already done much of the preliminary work, and all the footwork in the beginning, and to see the fruits from some of that already.
One of the things that the group from Michigan did with the young people is we went to the juvenile detention center, and we would play volleyball or basketball with the kids themselves, and then they would share Jesus with them as well. And then I have also started a jail ministry, where I went once a week at least to the jail, and they have what they call their healing room, and that's where I would usually be. To my surprise, when I would go and there would be a conflict of availability rooms, they would let me go. They took me to the pods themselves where the guys and the gals were staying, and I could do the presentation right there in their bedrooms, basically. And I also learned that they honored me enough to allow me to take some of the inmates out to do community work. And
Wow.
That was
What
quite a blessing as well. But yes, Rudy and several others have asked for baptism, and I don't know what will happen from there, but one of the things that happened was Bill Greenlee from the Stevensville Church in Michigan. I had told him about seeing on the thing that Andrews University had their study Bible, and they had a large print edition, which was basically just an enlargement of the Bible. And this lady was buying 5,000 Bibles to give to prison people. I said, there's no way that I could buy Bibles at $75 a Bible and so forth like that. In the vehicle, he told me, he says, well, let me talk to Ron Knott, who's at Andrews University.
He runs the university press.
University Press, yeah. And he says, yeah, we had an overprint of those Bibles. I got 5 cases of Bibles still here. And Bill says, well, we'll buy those and we'll send them out there to the reservation. So those came as well. One of the inmates at the jail, Patrick Mitchell, was quite an artist, and he did beautiful drawings within the healing room. And in that area that he was doing, I said, well, why don't you come over and do something for me? There was a blank wall there. I don't know if it's still there, but it was there for several years up on Highway 2. And he made an outdoor scene with the Native Americans in their teepees and so forth. And I had in my own mind an idea of what that would be like, but he came up with some of his ideas, and I just let him go with it. So that was one of the things that were there.
This man they'd had a contest in the jail as to who could decorate these brand new walls, because it was a new facility. And they did a contest. You draw pictures of what you think would be nice on these walls, and he won. And he painted the inside of that healing room. And they are absolutely exquisite. Beautiful. We were hoping that the mural would be similar to some of these. But all we could share with him was house paint. That's all we did for such a big project. So, but the interesting point is that he was killed later.
Oh.
Relative killed him. But probably jealous because we'd helped him, or he could work for us, or we gave him a tent for him to sleep in, and he pitched it in Esther's backyard right next to the shop or the store across the street from Frosty's. And at any rate, they were attacked in the night, and he was killed. But the mural that he painted, Gary got it all ready, put plywood. There was a alcove in the middle of the wall for a door, and he filled it in. The owners of the property told him it'd be all right, and he painted it. Then from then on until now, that was in 2018 spring. From then on, whenever we went up to when we didn't live there anymore, we had to empty our house and whatever, and we always checked on the mural to see what was what. People are mowing down the weeds in front of it and on the ground, and they haven't done any graffiti on it. They're taking care of that mural. So in a way, that is an indicator that they're watching, they're taking care.
Yeah, and it shows that they're giving a tremendous amount of respect to the work you guys are doing as well.
Gary started a workshop. We had a family in Berrien Springs, Youngbergs, and they had a son who has this Diabetes Undone, a method for being healed from diabetes if you follow their instructions. He'd been a public health doctor in Guam for 14 years and a nutrition person from another island. They all worked together and helped them learn how their diet should be. And the people joined them and became, there was several that their A1Cs went way down, but Dr. Wes Youngberg came to Poplar and lectured for a weekend there, and it inspired several people to come to those workshops. And so that was one way that we could help people. The year that we did two or three of those series, but the one that we wanted to do out in Fraser, in the west end of the reservation, didn't have any interest whatever, and that was the year that actually in the middle of that series Gary would have been unable to finish. So God in the meantime didn't let that happen. So
Praise the Lord. Look, sounds like we're running out of time, and but we're going to have to probably make a part 2